When I opened that garage door 3 weeks after my husband David's funeral, I thought I was looking for old furniture to donate to charity. Instead, I discovered that the man I had been married to for 12 years was living an entirely different life, one that would force me to question everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and my own strength. What I found in that garage didn't just change my understanding of my marriage, it transformed me from a woman who let others define her worth into someone who finally learned to trust her own voice. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Elena Vasquez, and until 3 weeks ago, I believed I was living the life I had always dreamed of having. Our colonial-style house in Westfield, Massachusetts sat on a tree-lined street where neighbors knew each other's names and children rode bicycles on sidewalks that felt safe and predictable. The white picket fence that surrounded our front yard was not metaphorical. David had installed it himself during our second year of marriage, painting each slat with the meticulous attention to detail that characterized everything he approached. David worked as a senior project manager at a regional construction firm, where his reputation for completing developments ahead of schedule and under budget had earned him recognition throughout central Massachusetts. His office walls displayed framed certificates of achievement and photographs of commercial buildings, whose foundations he had overseen from blueprint to ribbon-cutting ceremony. When people asked about his work, his eyes would light up as he described the satisfaction of creating structures that would serve communities for generations. Our morning routine had evolved into a comfortable rhythm over 12 years of marriage. David would wake at 5:30 each morning, brew coffee in the French press he had received as a wedding gift from his college roommate, and read construction industry publications while I prepared breakfast. We would sit together at the kitchen table overlooking our backyard garden, discussing plans for weekend projects or upcoming visits from my parents who lived 2 hours away in Connecticut. I taught third grade at Westfield Elementary School, where my classroom was known for its colorful bulletin boards and reading corner filled with donated books from local families. Teaching had always felt like more than a profession to me. It was an opportunity to nurture young minds during their most formative years and help children develop confidence in their abilities to learn and grow. My students' parents frequently commented during conference meetings about how much their children enjoyed school and looked forward to reading the stories we explored together each day. David and I had settled into what we believed was a mature, stable partnership. We attended Sunday services at St. Mary's Catholic Church, where David served as a volunteer coordinator for their annual food drive, and I helped organize the children's Christmas pageant. Our social circle consisted primarily of other couples from the neighborhood and church community, people who shared our values about family, faith, and community involvement. Evenings were spent working on home improvement projects that transformed our house into the kind of place featured in decorating magazines. David had remarkable skills with carpentry and electrical work, abilities he had learned from his father, who had owned a small contracting business before retiring to Florida. Together, we had renovated the kitchen with custom cabinets and granite countertops, converted the basement into a cozy family room with built-in bookshelves, and created a master bedroom suite that felt like a retreat from the demands of our professional responsibility. Yet beneath the surface of this carefully constructed life, I had begun to notice subtle signs that something essential was missing. Our conversations, while pleasant and considerate, rarely ventured beyond the practical matters of household management and work responsibility. When friends asked about our plans for starting a family, David would change the subject with such consistency that I had stopped bringing up the topic entirely. I found myself wondering whether the contentment I felt was genuine satisfaction or simply the absence of conflict. Our relationship operated with the efficiency of a well-managed business partnership, but I could not remember the last time we had laughed together until our stomachs hurt or stayed up late talking about dreams and fears the way we had during our courtship. Sometimes while grading papers in the evening, I would watch David working on his laptop and feel as though we were two people sharing the same space rather than building a life together. He was always gentle and respectful, bringing me tea without being asked and kissing my forehead before leaving for work each morning. But there was a quality of distance in his affection, as though he was performing the role of devoted husband rather than expressing genuine emotional connection. These observations troubled me because they seemed ungrateful. David provided financial security, helped maintain our beautiful home, and never gave me reason to question his commitment to our marriage. My mother frequently reminded me how fortunate I was to have found a man who was responsible, reliable, and respected in the community. My unmarried friends envied the stability and comfort that characterized my domestic situation. I convinced myself that these feelings of disconnection were normal phases that all couples experienced after the initial excitement of new love settled into the practical realities of adult partnership. Marriage required compromise and adjustment, and perhaps my expectations for emotional intimacy were unrealistic given the demands of our professional responsibilities and community commitment. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was helping my students with their science fair projects. Mrs. Henderson, the school secretary, appeared in my classroom doorway with an expression that immediately conveyed serious news. She asked me to step into the hallway where she quietly informed me that David had been taken to Mercy Medical Center after collapsing at a construction site. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of traffic lights and worried prayer. I remember thinking that this was probably heat exhaustion or dehydration. David had always pushed himself too hard during demanding projects, often forgetting to take breaks for meals or rest. We had argued about his tendency to prioritize work deadlines over his health, and I assumed this incident would finally convince him to establish better boundaries between professional and personal time. Patricia Reyes met me in the emergency department waiting room with news that shattered my understanding of our life together. David had suffered a massive heart attack that had claimed his life before the paramedics could transport him to the hospital. The medical team had performed every possible intervention, but the damage to his cardiovascular system had been too extensive to overcome. The words felt like they belonged to someone else's story. David was only 38 years old, maintained what appeared to be good physical health through regular exercise and careful nutrition, and had no family history of heart disease that would have suggested this kind of medical emergency. Dr. Reyes explained that sometimes young, apparently healthy individuals could have undetected cardiovascular conditions that manifested suddenly and catastrophically. I sat in that sterile waiting room, surrounded by the sounds of medical equipment and hushed conversations, trying to process the reality that my husband would never walk through our front door again. The man who had kissed my forehead that morning and promised to pick up groceries on his way home from work was gone, leaving me to navigate a future I had never imagined having to face alone. The funeral arrangements required decisions about details I had never considered: casket selection, flower arrangements, obituary wording, and reception planning for the friends and family members who would gather to honor David's memory. His mother flew in from Arizona, his sister drove down from Vermont, and colleagues from the construction firm offered to serve as pallbearers. The service at St. Mary's was attended by more than 200 people, many of whom I recognized from neighborhood gatherings and church events. Father Miguel delivered a homily about David's dedication to his family and community, his professional integrity, and his quiet faith in God's plan. Workers shared memories of his leadership on challenging projects and his willingness to mentor younger employees who were learning the construction trade. During the reception following the burial, I found myself moving through conversations like an observer rather than a participant. People offered condolences and shared stories about David's kindness and reliability, but their words felt like they were describing someone I had known only partially. The man they remembered was certainly the David I had lived with, but their descriptions highlighted qualities and experiences that I realized I had never fully understood or appreciated. Patterson, our next-door neighbor, mentioned how David had helped her elderly father install wheelchair ramps throughout his house without accepting any payment for the materials or labor. Tom Bradley, a colleague from the construction firm, described how David had voluntarily worked weekends to complete a community center project that would serve underprivileged children in Springfield. These stories revealed a level of community engagement and generosity that David had never discussed with me. As the weeks following the funeral passed, I struggled to establish new routines that accommodated the reality of living alone. The house felt simultaneously too quiet and too full of memories that triggered unexpected waves of grief. David's coffee mug remained in the kitchen cabinet where he had always kept it. His work boots sat by the back door, still dusty from his final day at the construction site. 3 weeks after the funeral, I decided that maintaining our home exactly as it had been during David's lifetime was preventing me from beginning the process of building a new life. I needed to sort through his belongings, donating items that could benefit others while keeping meaningful mementos that would honor his memory without overwhelming my living space. I began with his clothing, carefully folding shirts and jackets into boxes for donation to the Catholic Charities organization where David had volunteered during the holiday. His dresser drawers contained the usual collection of personal items: watches, cufflinks from our wedding, receipts from recent purchases, and business cards from professional contacts in the construction industry. The bedroom and bathroom were straightforward to organize because these spaces contained primarily personal items that clearly belonged to David or had obvious sentimental value. However, I had been avoiding the garage, which David had always considered his personal workshop and storage area. During our marriage, I had rarely entered that space because David preferred to maintain it according to his own organizational system. The garage had become David's domain where he stored tools, building materials from various projects, and equipment for home maintenance tasks. He had installed pegboards for tool organization, metal shelving units for hardware storage, and a workbench where he could complete small repair projects during evenings and weekends. When I needed something from the garage, I would typically ask David to retrieve it rather than navigating the space myself. Now, faced with the necessity of sorting through these items, I realized that I had no clear understanding of what the garage contained or how valuable the tools and materials might be. Some items could probably be sold to other contractors or homeowners who would put them to good use. Others might be specialized equipment that would be better donated to vocational training programs that taught construction skills to students. On a Saturday morning in late October, I finally gathered the courage to begin organizing the garage. I dressed in old jeans and a sweatshirt, prepared for dust and physical labor that would likely take most of the day. The autumn air was crisp and clear, perfect weather for outdoor work that would require opening the large garage door for ventilation and natural light. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The garage appeared exactly as David had left it, with tools arranged on pegboards and materials stacked neatly on industrial shelving. His truck was gone, having been sold to a colleague who had offered to purchase it immediately after the funeral. But the space still carried the scent of motor oil and sawdust that I associated with David's weekend project. I began systematically working from left to right across the space, examining each category of items and making preliminary decisions about disposal or retention. Most of the hand tools appeared to be in excellent condition and would certainly be valuable to other crafts. The power tools were newer models that David had purchased within the past few years, suggesting they would have significant resale value. As I worked deeper into the storage areas, I discovered boxes that had been placed on high shelves, beyond the reach of casual observation. These containers were different from the clearly labeled storage bins that held seasonal decorations and sporting equipment. They were unmarked cardboard boxes that seemed to have been deliberately positioned where they would not be easily noticed or accessed. Curiosity prompted me to retrieve the stepladder from the corner of the garage so I could examine these mysterious boxes more closely. The first container was heavier than expected and contained what appeared to be business documents, contracts, invoices, and correspondence related to construction projects. However, as I examined the paperwork more carefully, I noticed that none of these documents bore the letterhead of David's official employer. The company name on these materials was Heritage Restoration LLC, an organization I had never heard David mention, despite my familiarity with his work responsibilities and professional relationships. The contracts described renovation projects for historical buildings throughout western Massachusetts and northern Connecticut, work that would have required specialized expertise in preservation techniques and period-appropriate material. As I continued examining the contents of the boxes, I discovered business bank statements for Heritage Restoration LLC that showed substantial deposits and expenditures over the past 5 years. The financial activity indicated that this was not an occasional side project, but rather a thriving business enterprise that had generated significant revenue during the same period when David was supposedly working full-time for the regional construction. The bank statements revealed monthly deposits ranging from $15,000 to $30,000, amounts that far exceeded David's reported salary from his primary employment. The expenditures included payments to specialized craftsmen, purchases of historical building materials, and travel expenses for projects in locations throughout New England. I sat on the garage floor, surrounded by financial documents that painted a picture of a business operation I had never known existed. David had apparently been operating a successful historical restoration company while maintaining his position at the construction firm, generating income that he had never disclosed to me, despite our joint financial planning and tax preparation each year. The implications of this discovery extended beyond simple financial secrecy. Historical restoration required specialized training and certification that David had never mentioned pursuing. The client contracts indicated relationships with historical societies, museum foundations, and private collectors who owned properties requiring expert preservation services. This level of professional recognition suggested years of experience and reputation building in a field I had never heard him discuss. The shock of discovering David's secret business operation triggered a cascade of questions about the fundamental nature of our relationship. How had he managed to operate a successful company while maintaining his regular employment schedule? Where had he acquired the specialized knowledge required for historical restoration work? Why had he chosen to keep this significant aspect of his professional life completely hidden from me? More troubling than the financial secrecy was the realization that David had been passionate about work that he had never shared with me. The contracts and correspondence revealed genuine enthusiasm for historical preservation, detailed knowledge of architectural periods and construction techniques, and professional relationships with experts in specialized fields. This was clearly work that brought him satisfaction and recognition, yet he had never mentioned it during our dinner conversations or weekend discussions about his career goals and aspirations. I began to understand that the emotional distance I had sensed in our marriage might have been related to David's compartmentalization of his authentic interests and professional identity. The man who came home each evening and discussed routine construction projects was apparently only one aspect of someone who was deeply engaged in meaningful work that aligned with his genuine passions and capability. The discovery forced me to confront uncomfortable questions about my own role in creating an environment where David felt the need to maintain such complete secrecy about his professional fulfillment. Had I been so focused on the stability and security of his official employment that I had discouraged him from pursuing work that was more personally meaningful but potentially less predictable financially? As the afternoon progressed and I continued examining the contents of the boxes, I realized that David's hidden business represented not just financial assets, but also professional relationships and ongoing commitments that required immediate attention. The most recent contracts indicated projects that were scheduled for completion during the coming months, with clients who were presumably expecting David to fulfill his obligations according to agreed-upon timelines. The responsibility of managing these discoveries felt overwhelming. I possessed no knowledge of historical restoration techniques, no relationships with the specialized craftsmen who had been working with David, and no understanding of the standards and requirements that governed this type of professional work. Yet I was now the inheritor of a business operation that had financial and legal obligations to clients who were depending on Heritage Restoration LLC to complete their projects. The emotional weight of this situation extended beyond practical concerns about business management. I was mourning not only the loss of my husband but also the recognition that I had never truly known him. The David who had been passionate about historical preservation, knowledgeable about architectural periods, and respected by museum professionals, was a person I was meeting for the first time through these documents and contracts. This realization triggered a profound sense of grief for the relationship we might have had if David had felt comfortable sharing his authentic interests and professional aspirations with me. Perhaps our conversations could have been more engaging and meaningful if I had known about his work with historical societies and preservation projects. Perhaps our marriage could have been a partnership where we both felt free to pursue our genuine passions and support each other's professional development. The discovery in the garage was forcing me to confront not only the secrets David had kept, but also my own role in creating a marriage where authentic communication about dreams and aspirations had somehow become impossible. As I prepared to face the complex task of understanding and managing David's hidden legacy, I realized that this process would require me to examine my own assumptions about success, security, and the kind of life I wanted to build moving forward. The sun was beginning to set as I carefully returned the documents to their boxes, knowing that tomorrow would bring the challenging work of unraveling the full extent of David's secret professional life and determining how to honor both his memory and his commitments to the clients who had trusted Heritage Restoration LLC with their precious historical property. That evening, I sat at our dining room table with David's Heritage Restoration documents spread across the polished oak surface where we had shared 12 years of meals and conversation. The familiar space felt transformed by the presence of these papers that revealed a professional life I had never known existed. Each contract, invoice, and correspondence piece painted a portrait of a man whose authentic passions and capabilities had remained completely hidden from me throughout our marriage. The business bank statements revealed a financial reality that challenged everything I thought I understood about our household economics. While I had been carefully budgeting our combined income from teaching and David's construction salary, he had been generating substantial additional revenue through his restoration work. The monthly deposits to the Heritage Restoration account often exceeded our entire declared household income, suggesting that David had been living well below his actual means while maintaining the fiction of financial constraint. This discovery triggered questions that extended far beyond simple financial secrecy. David had frequently expressed concern about our ability to afford major purchases or vacations, discussions that had influenced my own spending decisions and career planning. I had accepted additional tutoring responsibilities during summers to supplement our income, believing that financial prudence was necessary for our long-term security. Meanwhile, David had access to resources that could have eliminated these concerns entirely. The contracts revealed the scope and sophistication of David's restoration expertise. Heritage Restoration LLC had been commissioned to preserve historical churches, colonial-era homes, and institutional buildings throughout New England. The project descriptions included technical specifications for period-appropriate materials, specialized preservation techniques, and coordination with historical societies and museum professionals. This level of professional recognition indicated years of experience and reputation building that David had somehow managed to accomplish while maintaining his conventional construction employment. I found myself examining each document with the analytical attention I typically reserved for lesson planning, searching for clues about how David had managed this dual professional existence. The project timeline suggested that restoration work had been scheduled during evenings, weekends, and periods when David had told me he was attending construction industry conferences or visiting project sites for his official employee. Sleep proved impossible that night as my mind processed the implications of these discoveries. I found myself reconstructing conversations and memories from our marriage, searching for signs I had missed or explanations I had accepted without sufficient scrutiny. David's weekend absences, which I had attributed to work obligations or visits with his college friends, now appeared to have been opportunities for him to pursue his authentic professional interests without my knowledge or involvement. The emotional impact of this realization was more devastating than the financial secrecy itself. David had been passionate about meaningful work that brought him recognition and fulfillment, yet he had chosen to share none of this satisfaction with me. Our dinner conversations had been filled with complaints about routine construction projects and mundane workplace dynamics, while his genuine professional accomplishments remained completely absent from our communication. I began to understand that the emotional distance I had sensed in our relationship might have been the natural consequence of David's compartmentalization of his authentic identity. The man who came home each evening was presenting only a fraction of himself, withholding the aspects of his personality and capabilities that brought him genuine satisfaction and professional recognition. Sunday morning arrived with unprecedented clarity about the immediate steps I needed to take. The Heritage Restoration contracts included client contact information and project timelines that required urgent attention. Several preservation projects were scheduled for completion during the coming weeks, with property owners who were presumably expecting David to fulfill his contractual obligations according to agreed-upon schedule. My first priority was to contact these clients and explain the situation honestly while exploring options for project completion that would honor David's commitments without misleading anyone about my own capability.
This would require difficult conversations with people who had trusted David's expertise and were depending on Heritage Restoration LLC to preserve their valuable historical properties. Monday morning found me seated at David's desk in our home office, surrounded by client files and contact information for projects in various stages of completion. The professional relationships David had cultivated represented years of trust building and reputation development that could not be easily transferred or replaced. However, his clients deserved immediate notification about the circumstances that would affect their project timelines and completion strategy. My first call was to Margaret Thornfield, whose 1760 colonial home in Old Sturbridge Village was scheduled for window restoration using traditional glazing techniques. Miss Thornfield answered the phone with the warm familiarity of someone who had developed a personal relationship with David through their professional collaboration. "Alina, what a pleasant surprise to hear from you directly," she said. "David has spoken so fondly of you during our conversations about the window restoration project. I hope everything is proceeding according to schedule for the completion next week." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult I had ever navigated. I explained David's sudden death and the discovery of Heritage Restoration LLC. Acknowledging that I possessed no knowledge of historical preservation techniques or the specific requirements of her project, Mrs. Thornfield's shock and sympathy were genuine, but her concern about the preservation work was equally understandable given the historical significance of her property and the specialized nature of the restoration techniques involved. "David was such a meticulous craftsman," she said quietly. "He understood the historical integrity of these windows and had developed a restoration approach that would preserve their authenticity while improving their functionality. I'm not sure how we can proceed without his expertise." Similar conversations with other heritage restoration clients revealed the depth of professional relationships David had cultivated and the complexity of the projects he had undertaken. Each client expressed genuine affection for David as both a craftsman and a person, sharing stories about his attention to detail, his knowledge of historical building techniques, and his commitment to preserving the authenticity of their properties. Richard Barnes, whose 1820 Federal-style mansion was undergoing foundation restoration, described David as one of the few craftsmen who truly understood the principles of historical preservation. Sarah Mitchell, the director of the Lexington Historical Society, praised David's encyclopedic knowledge of colonial-era construction techniques and his ability to source period-appropriate materials from specialized suppliers. These conversations painted a portrait of David as a respected professional, whose expertise was valued by clients who owned some of New England's most significant historical property. The recognition and appreciation he had earned in this field stood in stark contrast to his modest descriptions of his official construction work, revealing the extent to which he had compartmentalized his professional fulfillment. As I continued examining the heritage restoration business records, the financial implications became increasingly complex. The company had established relationships with specialized suppliers of historical building materials, craftsmen who possessed traditional skills, and subcontractors who worked exclusively on preservation projects. David had apparently built an entire professional network that operated parallel to his conventional construction career.
The business checking account contained substantial funds that were designated for specific projects, including advance payments from clients and deposits for materials that had been ordered but not yet delivered. The financial obligations associated with these ongoing projects created immediate legal and ethical responsibilities that I was unprepared to manage. More troubling was the discovery of a business credit line that David had established to fund material purchases and subcontractor payments for larger restoration projects. The credit facility showed a current balance of $68,000, representing funds that had been borrowed against anticipated project revenues. Without David's expertise to complete the contracted work, these financial obligations could become personal liabilities that would affect our household finances and my ability to maintain our home. I realized that I needed professional assistance to understand the legal and financial implications of inheriting a business operation with ongoing contractual commitments and financial obligations. The complexity of the situation extended beyond simple asset valuation to include questions about business continuity, client relationships, and professional liability that required expertise I did not possess. My first step was to contact David's attorney, James Rodriguez, who had prepared our wills and handled our real estate transactions. However, when I called his office, I discovered that Rodriguez had no knowledge of Heritage Restoration LLC or any business-related legal documents that David might have prepared. This revelation suggested that David had used separate legal counsel for his restoration business, further evidence of the compartmentalization that had characterized his approach to this aspect of his professional life. The emotional weight of these discoveries forced me to confront uncomfortable questions about my own role in creating a marriage, where David felt compelled to maintain such comprehensive secrecy about his authentic interests and professional aspirations. Had I been so focused on financial security and conventional success that I had discouraged him from pursuing work that was more personally meaningful but potentially less predictable economically? I found myself examining our conversations about career goals and professional development, searching for moments when David might have attempted to share his interest in historical preservation, but encountered resistance or disinterest from me. Had there been subtle signals that I had missed or dismissed because they did not align with my assumptions about practical career advancement and financial planning? The realization that David had been passionate about meaningful work while presenting himself as resigned to routine employment challenged my understanding of our relationship dynamic. Perhaps the emotional distance I had sensed was not the natural evolution of mature partnership, but rather the consequence of fundamental disconnection between our authentic selves and the roles we had been performing for each other. This recognition triggered a profound sense of grief that extended beyond mourning David's death to include regret about the relationship we might have had if we had both felt free to share our genuine interests and aspirations. The conversations we could have had about historical architecture, preservation techniques, and the satisfaction of contributing to cultural heritage preservation represented opportunities for connection and shared enthusiasm that had been lost to secrecy and compartmentalization. I began to understand that David's hidden professional life was not simply about financial independence or career advancement, but about pursuing work that aligned with his authentic values and interests. The clients who had described his passion for preserving historical authenticity and his knowledge of traditional building techniques had witnessed aspects of David's personality that I had never been privileged to observe. Determined to understand the full scope of David's restoration work and professional relationships, I decided to visit some of the project sites and meet with clients who could provide insight into his expertise and working method. This investigation would help me assess the feasibility of completing ongoing projects, while honoring David's commitments to property owners who had trusted Heritage Restoration LLC with their valuable historical asset. My first visit was to the Whitmore farmstead, a 1750 colonial property where David had been restoring the original kitchen hearth using period-appropriate masonry technique. The property owner, Robert Whitmore, was a retired history professor who had inherited the farmstead from his grandfather and was committed to preserving its historical authenticity for future generations. Professor Whitmore welcomed me with genuine warmth and immediately began sharing stories about David's meticulous approach to the hearth restoration project. "Your husband was a true craftsman," he said as we examined the partially completed work. He had studied 18th-century masonry techniques and was using traditional lime mortar that he had mixed according to historical specifications. This level of attention to authenticity is extremely rare among contemporary contractors. The hearth restoration demonstrated David's commitment to historical accuracy and his willingness to invest additional time and resources to achieve results that met preservation standards. The stonework showed evidence of careful selection and placement, with mortar joints that matched the texture and color of the original masonry. Professor Whitmore explained that David had sourced the replacement stones from a quarry that had supplied materials for colonial-era construction, ensuring visual and structural consistency with the farmstead's historical character. David understood that historical preservation is not simply about maintaining old buildings, Professor Whitmore continued. It's about honoring the craftsmanship and cultural heritage that these structures represent. He approached each project with the reverence and expertise that this work requires. Similar visits to other project sites revealed the scope of David's expertise and the respect he had earned within the historical preservation community. At the Riverside Meeting House, a 1680 Puritan church where David had been restoring the original timber frame, the building committee chairwoman described his knowledge of traditional joinery techniques and his ability to repair structural elements without compromising their historical integrity. These site visits revealed that David had acquired specialized knowledge and certifications that I had been completely unaware of during our marriage. He had completed training programs in historical preservation techniques, timber framing, and traditional masonry that represented significant investments of time and financial resource. The certificates and credentials displayed in his heritage restoration office indicated years of professional development in specialized fields that required both technical expertise and cultural sensitivity. The discovery of David's educational achievements in historical preservation raised additional questions about how he had managed to pursue this training while maintaining his conventional employment and household responsibility. The certification programs were offered by prestigious institutions, such as the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and required intensive coursework, hands-on training, and examination processes that would have demanded substantial time commitment. I realized that David's weekend absences and business travel, which I had attributed to requirements of his construction employment, had likely included educational opportunities and professional development activities related to his preservation work. The conferences, workshops, and certification programs represented a parallel professional life that had been completely hidden from me despite the significant time and financial investments they required. This recognition forced me to confront the extent to which I had accepted David's explanations about his professional activities without asking questions or expressing interest in his career development. Had I been so preoccupied with my own teaching responsibilities and household management that I had failed to provide the kind of supportive partnership that would have encouraged David to share his authentic professional aspirations? The emotional impact of this realization was compounded by recognition that David had achieved significant professional recognition in a field that aligned with his genuine interests and values, while maintaining the fiction that his work life was routine and unfulfilling. The passion and expertise he had developed in historical preservation represented aspects of his personality that I had never been privileged to witness or appreciate. As I continued investigating the scope of David's heritage restoration business and the complexity of his ongoing client commitments, I faced a decision that would affect both my immediate financial security and my long-term personal development. The business represented substantial assets and professional relationships that could potentially be maintained or transferred to qualified craftsmen who possessed the specialized expertise required for historical preservation work. However, the discovery of David's hidden professional life had triggered questions about my own relationship with authentic work and personal fulfillment that extended beyond immediate practical concerns about business management. Teaching third grade had always provided satisfaction through opportunities to nurture young minds and contribute to educational development, but I had never examined whether my career choices reflected genuine passion or simply represented safe and predictable employment that met societal expectations for women in their 30s. The clients I had met during my investigation of David's restoration projects possessed obvious enthusiasm for preserving cultural heritage and maintaining connections to historical traditions that transcended immediate financial consideration. Their willingness to invest substantial resources in authentic preservation work reflected values and priorities that challenged my own assumptions about practical decision-making and long-term planning. I found myself questioning whether the security and predictability that had characterized my professional choices had prevented me from exploring interests and capabilities that might have led to more fulfilling work and personal growth. The discovery of David's passionate engagement with meaningful work had created space for examining my own relationship with authentic purpose and professional satisfaction. The immediate challenge of managing Heritage Restoration LLC's client commitments and financial obligations provided an unexpected opportunity to explore capabilities and interests that I had never been required to develop. The process of understanding David's preservation work and communicating with his clients had revealed aspects of historical architecture and cultural preservation that captured my curiosity in ways that my teaching responsibilities had not generated for several years. As I prepared to make decisions about the future of David's business and my own professional direction, I realized that this crisis had created possibilities for personal growth and authentic development that would have been impossible within the comfortable but limiting framework of our previous life together. The shocking discovery in the garage had forced me to confront not only David's secrets, but also my own assumptions about security, success, and the kind of life that would bring genuine satisfaction and fulfillment. The third week of investigating David's heritage restoration business brought discoveries that fundamentally altered my understanding of his professional capabilities and the sophisticated network of relationships he had cultivated within the historical preservation community. As I continued contacting clients and examining project documentation, I encountered individuals whose expertise and passion for cultural heritage preservation challenged my assumptions about meaningful work and authentic professional engagement. Catherine Williams, the curator of decorative arts at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, had commissioned Heritage Restoration LLC to restore the interior woodwork of a 1790 Federal-style mansion that the museum had acquired for their period room exhibition. When I called to explain David's death and discuss the status of her project, Dr. Williams expressed shock that quickly transformed into detailed appreciation for David's unique expertise. "Your husband possessed an extraordinary understanding of late 18th century woodworking techniques," she explained during our phone conversation. He had studied the original tool marks and joinery methods used by period craftsmen and could replicate their work with remarkable accuracy. This level of historical knowledge and technical skill is extremely rare in contemporary preservation work. Dr. Williams described how David had spent considerable time researching the original craftsmen who had created the mansion's interior woodwork, studying examples of their work in other historical properties and developing techniques for repairing damaged elements without compromising their historical authenticity. His approach combined scholarly research with practical craftsmanship in ways that honored both the original artisans and the contemporary preservation standards required for museum-quality restoration. The conversation revealed that David had been recognized as a leading expert in Federal period interior restoration throughout New England. His work had been featured in preservation journals and professional conferences, where he had presented research about traditional woodworking techniques and their application to contemporary restoration projects. This level of professional recognition represented years of scholarship and practice that I had never known existed. Similar conversations with other clients and professional colleagues revealed the breadth of David's expertise and the respect he had earned within specialized preservation community. Master craftsman Thomas Anderson, who had collaborated with David on timber frame restoration projects, described him as one of the few contemporary builders who truly understood the principles and techniques that guided traditional construction methods. My investigation led to the discovery that David had been auditing graduate-level courses in architectural history and preservation science at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where he had developed relationships with faculty members who specialized in historical building techniques and cultural heritage preservation. Professor Elizabeth Hartwell, who taught courses in preservation methodology, remembered David as an exceptional student whose practical experience informed his academic understanding of historical construction practice. David brought a unique perspective to our discussions because he combined hands-on craftsmanship with scholarly research, Professor Hartwell explained when I contacted her about David's academic involvement. Most of our students are either academics who lack practical experience or craftsmen who have not studied the theoretical foundations of preservation work. David bridged both worlds in ways that enriched our classroom discussions and informed his own professional practice. The discovery that David had been pursuing graduate-level education in preservation science without my knowledge raised profound questions about the extent of his intellectual engagement with his authentic professional interest. The coursework he had completed represented significant time commitments and academic challenges that would have required dedicated study and research outside his official work responsibilities and our household routine. Professor Hartwell shared that David had been working toward a graduate certificate in historic preservation,
a credential that would have formally recognized his expertise and opened additional professional opportunities within the museum and cultural heritage sector. His academic work had included research projects examining traditional building techniques, material analysis of historical structures, and case studies of successful preservation initiatives throughout New England. The academic rigor that David had pursued in his preservation studies stood in stark contrast to his casual dismissal of continuing education opportunities when we had discussed professional development during our marriage. I had encouraged him to pursue management training or business courses that would advance his career within the construction industry, unaware that he was already engaged in sophisticated academic work that aligned with his authentic professional interest and aspiration. As I worked with David's accountant, Michael Chen, to understand the full scope of Heritage Restoration's financial operations, the complexity of David's business management became increasingly apparent. The company had established multiple revenue streams that included not only direct restoration services, but also consulting work, educational workshops, and the sale of specialized tools and materials to other preservation professionals. The consulting contracts revealed that David had been providing expert testimony for insurance claims involving damage to historical properties, offering professional opinions about appropriate restoration techniques for properties seeking historical designation, and serving as a technical advisor for renovation projects that required preservation compliance. These consulting relationships generated substantial revenue while establishing David as a recognized authority within the professional community. The educational workshops that David had conducted represented another dimension of his expertise that I had been completely unaware of during our marriage. He had taught weekend seminars on traditional building techniques at craft schools and preservation organizations throughout New England, sharing his knowledge with both professional craftsmen and interested property owners who wanted to understand historical construction methods. Michael explained that heritage restoration had been generating annual revenues that exceeded $200,000 while maintaining profit margins that reflected the specialized nature of David's expertise and the premium prices that clients were willing to pay for authentic preservation work. The financial success of the business demonstrated that David's passion for historical preservation had not only provided personal fulfillment, but had also created substantial economic opportunities. The discovery of this financial success challenged my assumptions about the relationship between meaningful work and economic security. I had accepted the conventional wisdom that pursuing authentic interest often required financial sacrifice, yet David had built a thriving business around his genuine passion, while maintaining the appearance of financial constraint within our household budget. During my continued exploration of David's garage workspace, I discovered a section that had been configured as a workshop for creating custom tools and hardware required for historical restoration projects. The area contained equipment for metalworking, wood turning, and finish application that represented significant investments in specialized capabilities that extended beyond conventional construction tools and techniques. The workshop included a forge for creating hand-forged hardware that matched the ironwork found in historical buildings, woodworking lathes for reproducing period-appropriate architectural details, and finishing stations for applying traditional paint and stain formulations that replicated the appearance and aging characteristics of historical surface. The sophistication of this equipment indicated that David had been producing custom components for restoration projects rather than simply sourcing materials from commercial suppliers. Detailed project notebooks documented David's research into historical manufacturing techniques and his experiments with traditional materials and methods. He had studied the composition of historical paints and stains, researched the tempering techniques used by colonial-era blacksmiths, and developed methods for aging new materials to achieve visual consistency with original building components. The notebooks revealed David's scholarly approach to understanding historical craftsmanship and his commitment to preserving traditional techniques that were disappearing from contemporary building practice. His work represented cultural preservation at its most fundamental level, maintaining knowledge and skills that connected contemporary craftsmen to centuries of building tradition and cultural heritage. This discovery forced me to recognize that David's garage had not simply been a storage area or casual workshop, but rather a sophisticated laboratory where he had been conducting research and developing techniques that contributed to the broader field of historical preservation. The space represented years of investment in equipment, materials, and knowledge development that demonstrated his serious commitment to advancing preservation science and practice. My investigation revealed that David had been actively involved in professional organizations and preservation advocacy groups that worked to protect historical buildings and promote traditional building techniques. He had served on the board of directors for the New England Preservation Alliance and had been a founding member of the Traditional Building Skills Consortium, organizations that brought together craftsmen, scholars, and property owners committed to maintaining cultural heritage through building preservation. The recognition that David had received within these professional communities included awards for exceptional restoration work, scholarly contributions to preservation literature, and leadership in promoting traditional building skills among contemporary craftsmen. His professional reputation extended throughout New England and into national preservation organizations, where his expertise in federal period architecture and traditional construction techniques was widely respected. Letters of appreciation from historical societies, museum directors, and preservation professionals documented the impact of David's work on significant cultural heritage projects throughout the region. His restoration of the Hancock Clark House in Lexington had been featured in Colonial Homes magazine as an exemplary demonstration of authentic preservation technique. His work on the restoration of the Connecticut River Valley farmhouses had been recognized by the National Trust for Historic Preservation as a model for maintaining rural architectural heritage. These accolades represented professional achievements that David had never shared with me, despite their significance within his chosen field and their reflection of his expertise and dedication to meaningful work. The recognition he had earned demonstrated that his passion for historical preservation had translated into contributions that would benefit future generations by maintaining connections to cultural heritage and traditional craftsmanship. The accumulation of discoveries about David's hidden professional life created an emotional complexity that extended beyond grief and shock to include recognition of my own role in creating a marriage where authentic communication about dreams and aspirations had become impossible. The evidence of David's passion and expertise in historical preservation forced me to examine my own relationship with meaningful work and personal fulfillment. I began to understand that my focus on financial security and conventional career advancement had created an environment where David felt compelled to pursue his authentic interests in secret rather than sharing his enthusiasm and seeking support for his professional development. My emphasis on predictability and traditional definitions of success had inadvertently discouraged exploration of work that might have brought both of us greater satisfaction and personal growth. The clients and colleagues who had appreciated David's expertise and dedication represented a community of individuals who valued cultural heritage preservation and traditional craftsmanship over conventional measures of professional success. Their enthusiasm for meaningful work and their willingness to invest substantial resources in preserving historical authenticity challenged my assumptions about practical decision-making and long-term planning. This recognition triggered a period of introspection about my own career choices and the extent to which my teaching work had provided genuine satisfaction versus simply meeting societal expectations for stable, respectable employment. While I had found fulfillment in nurturing young minds and contributing to educational development, I had never examined whether my professional path reflected authentic passion or merely represented safe choices that avoided the uncertainty associated with exploring less conventional alternatives. The process of understanding David's preservation work and communicating with his clients had awakened curiosities about historical architecture, cultural heritage, and traditional craftsmanship that I had never allowed myself to explore during our marriage. The detailed conversations about restoration techniques, historical research, and preservation methodology had engaged my intellectual interests in ways that my routine teaching responsibilities had not stimulated for several years. As I continued managing the immediate challenges associated with heritage restoration's client commitments and financial obligations, I realized that the crisis had created an unexpected opportunity to examine my own assumptions about work, success, and personal fulfillment. The discovery of David's authentic professional passion had revealed possibilities for meaningful engagement with cultural preservation that aligned with interests and capabilities I had never been encouraged to develop. The specialized knowledge that David had acquired through his preservation work represented expertise that could potentially be learned and applied by others who possessed dedication and intellectual curiosity about historical building techniques and cultural heritage preservation. While I lacked his technical craftsmanship skills, my background in education and research provided capabilities that could be valuable within the preservation community's efforts to maintain traditional knowledge and promote cultural heritage awareness. The financial resources that heritage restoration had generated through David's expertise represented assets that could support continued education and professional development in preservation-related fields. Rather than simply liquidating the business and returning to conventional employment, I had the opportunity to explore whether David's passion for meaningful work might inspire my own transformation toward more authentic professional engagement. The clients and colleagues who had valued David's contributions to historical preservation represented a community of individuals committed to work that transcended immediate financial considerations and contributed to cultural heritage maintenance for future generations. Their dedication to preserving traditional craftsmanship and historical authenticity provided models for professional engagement that prioritized meaning and impact over conventional success metrics. Motivated by the discoveries about David's educational background and professional development, I began investigating opportunities for learning about historical preservation techniques and cultural heritage management. The University of Massachusetts Amherst offered graduate programs in historic preservation that combined scholarly research with practical training in restoration methodology and preservation planning. The coursework that David had been pursuing provided a framework for understanding the intellectual foundations of preservation work and the scholarly research that informed professional practice within the field. The academic rigor of preservation science appealed to my educational background while offering opportunities to develop expertise in areas that connected historical research with practical applications for cultural heritage maintenance. Professional development opportunities within preservation organizations offered pathways for acquiring specialized knowledge without requiring complete career transformation or extensive academic commitment. Workshops in traditional building techniques, preservation planning, and cultural heritage management provided practical training that could complement academic study while building professional relationships within the preservation community. The investigation of educational opportunities revealed that the preservation field valued diverse backgrounds and welcomed individuals who brought teaching experience, research capability, and communication skills to efforts aimed at maintaining cultural heritage and promoting traditional craftsmanship knowledge.
My educational background and experience in curriculum development could potentially contribute to preservation education initiatives and public outreach programs designed to increase awareness of cultural heritage preservation. As I concluded this phase of investigation into David's hidden professional life and began contemplating my own future direction, I realized that the shocking discovery in the garage had created possibilities for personal growth and authentic professional engagement that would have been impossible within the comfortable but limiting framework of our previous life together. The crisis had forced me to confront not only David's secrets but also my own assumptions about security, success, and the kind of work that would bring genuine satisfaction and contribute to something larger than immediate personal advancement. 3 weeks into my investigation of David's heritage restoration business, I was working in his garage workshop when I heard a vehicle pull into our driveway. Through the window, I observed a woman in her mid-50s, stepping out of a well-maintained pickup truck, loaded with what appeared to be antique wooden beams and traditional building hardware. Her confident demeanor and practical work clothing suggested someone accustomed to hands-on restoration projects and physical labor. The woman approached the garage with purposeful strides, clearly familiar with the property layout and comfortable navigating our driveway despite never having met me personally. When she reached the open garage door where I was examining David's metalworking equipment, she extended her hand with a warm but professional greeting that immediately conveyed both sympathy and practical concern. "You must be Elena," she said with genuine warmth. "I am Victoria Brennan, and I worked closely with David on several restoration projects over the past 3 years. I heard about his passing through our professional network, and I wanted to express my condolences while discussing some practical matters related to our ongoing collaboration." Victoria's presence immediately transformed the atmosphere in the garage from solitary investigation to professional consultation. Her expertise was evident in the way she examined David's equipment and workspace, recognizing specialized tools and understanding their applications to historical restoration work. Her familiarity with the setup suggested that she had visited the workshop previously and understood the sophistication of David's capability. "David spoke of you often during our project discussions," Victoria continued, "though he always mentioned that you were not directly involved in the restoration work. I imagine discovering the extent of his business operations has been quite overwhelming given the circumstance." Her directness was refreshing after weeks of navigating complex financial documents and client relationships without guidance from someone who understood the practical realities of historical preservation work. Victoria represented the first person I had encountered who possessed both professional expertise in David's field and personal knowledge of his working methods and project management approaches. Victoria explained that she operated Brennan Traditional Building Arts, a specialized firm that provided timber framing, traditional joinery, and structural restoration services for historical properties throughout Western New England. Her collaboration with Heritage Restoration had developed over several years as they discovered complementary expertise that allowed them to tackle complex preservation projects, requiring both her structural knowledge and David's architectural restoration capability. "Your husband possessed extraordinary expertise in federal and colonial period architectural details," Victoria explained as we walked through the workshop area. "My background is in timber frame restoration and traditional structural systems, so our collaboration allowed us to offer comprehensive preservation services that maintained historical authenticity while meeting contemporary safety and functionality requirements." The partnership between Heritage Restoration and Brennan Traditional Building Arts had created opportunities for both businesses to pursue larger and more complex projects than either could have managed independently. Victoria described restoration initiatives they had completed together, including the comprehensive renovation of a 1740 Massachusetts Bay Colony meeting house and the structural stabilization of several 18th-century farmhouses that required both timber frame repair and architectural detail restoration. Victoria's description of their professional relationship revealed another dimension of David's hidden expertise and the sophisticated network of professional relationships he had cultivated within the preservation community. The collaboration had apparently been built on mutual respect for each other's specialized knowledge and shared commitment to maintaining the highest standards of historical authenticity and preservation methodology. David understood that successful preservation work requires collaboration between specialists who possess different but complementary expertise, Victoria continued. "Too many restoration projects fail because general contractors attempt to handle specialized preservation work without understanding the unique requirements and techniques that historical properties demand." As our conversation continued, Victoria revealed that David had been serving as an informal mentor to younger craftsmen who were interested in learning traditional building techniques and developing expertise in historical preservation work. His workshop had regularly hosted weekend training sessions where he shared knowledge about period-appropriate joinery methods, traditional finish applications, and the research techniques required for authentic restoration plans. David believed strongly in the importance of passing traditional knowledge to the next generation of craftsmen, Victoria explained. He was concerned that many traditional building techniques were disappearing because contemporary construction education focuses on modern materials and methods rather than the skills required for historical preservation. The mentorship activities that David had been conducting represented another aspect of his authentic professional engagement that had remained completely hidden from me during our marriage. The teaching and knowledge sharing that he had pursued reflected genuine passion for cultural heritage preservation and commitment to ensuring that traditional craftsmanship would continue to inform future restoration work. Victoria described how David's teaching approach combined scholarly research with hands-on demonstration, helping younger craftsmen understand both the theoretical foundations of traditional techniques and their practical application to contemporary preservation projects. His ability to connect historical knowledge with modern professional practice had made him a valuable resource for craftsmen seeking to develop specialized expertise in preservation work. The craftsmen who learned from David have gone on to work on significant preservation projects throughout New England. Victoria continued. His influence on the next generation of preservation professionals represents one of his most important contributions to the field, though I suspect you were unaware of these teaching activities. As Victoria continued sharing stories about David's professional achievements and community involvement, she posed a question that fundamentally challenged my assumptions about my own capabilities and potential for meaningful professional engagement. Her inquiry was delivered with the matter-of-fact directness of someone accustomed to practical problem-solving and realistic assessment of available resources and opportunity. Have you given any consideration to continuing David's work in some capacity rather than simply liquidating heritage restoration and returning to conventional employment? Victoria asked. Your educational background and communication skills could be valuable assets within the preservation community, particularly for projects that require research, documentation, and client education components. The question struck me as simultaneously absurd and intriguing. My knowledge of historical preservation techniques was virtually non-existent, and my practical experience with traditional building methods was limited to observing David's weekend home improvement project. The idea that I could somehow contribute meaningfully to specialized restoration work seemed to ignore the technical expertise and hands-on experience that David had developed over years of study and practice. However, Victoria's suggestion forced me to consider whether successful preservation work required only technical craftsmanship or whether other capabilities might also contribute to authentic cultural heritage maintenance. My background in education had developed research skills, communication abilities, and project management experience that could potentially support preservation initiatives even if I lacked David's specific technical expertise. The preservation field values diverse professional backgrounds because successful projects require not only technical craftsmanship but also historical research, client education, regulatory compliance, and project coordination. Victoria continued. Your teaching experience and research capabilities could contribute to preservation work in ways that would honor David's legacy while allowing you to develop your own expertise in areas that align with your interests and strengths. Victoria's perspective on professional development within the preservation field challenged conventional assumptions about career transition and the relationship between existing skills and new opportunities. She described how successful preservation professionals often brought diverse educational backgrounds and professional experiences to their work, creating interdisciplinary approaches that enhanced both the scholarly foundations and practical applications of cultural heritage maintenance. Many of the most respected professionals in our field began their careers in education, museum work, architecture, or other fields before discovering their passion for preservation work, Victoria explained. The combination of specialized preservation knowledge with broader professional capabilities often produces more innovative and effective approaches to complex restoration challenges. Her description of career development pathways within the preservation community suggested that meaningful professional transition was possible for individuals who possessed intellectual curiosity, commitment to cultural heritage value, and willingness to invest time and effort in developing specialized knowledge and practical skills. The field appeared to welcome individuals who brought fresh perspectives and complementary expertise to traditional preservation work. Victoria outlined specific ways that educational background and research experience could contribute to preservation projects, including historical documentation, archival research, client communication, regulatory compliance, and public education initiatives. These aspects of preservation work required skills that I had developed through teaching and could potentially apply to cultural heritage maintenance, without requiring the technical craftsmanship expertise that David had spent years developing. The heritage restoration client base and professional relationships that David established represent valuable assets that could support your transition into preservation work if you chose to pursue that direction. Victoria continued. Many clients would welcome continuity of service and could provide opportunities for learning and professional development while you acquired specialized preservation knowledge. Victoria's insights into professional development within the preservation field led to discussion of specific educational opportunities that could provide the foundation for meaningful transition into cultural heritage work. She recommended graduate programs, professional workshops, and certification courses that would develop both theoretical knowledge and practical skills while building professional relationships within the preservation community. The University of Massachusetts Amherst Historic Preservation Program that David had been pursuing offered comprehensive education in preservation methodology, historical research techniques, and project management approaches that would provide intellectual foundations for professional practice. The coursework combined scholarly study with hands-on training in ways that would accommodate diverse professional backgrounds and learning styles. Professional development opportunities offered by preservation organizations provided alternative pathways for acquiring specialized knowledge without requiring full-time academic commitment. The National Trust for Historic Preservation, the Association for Preservation Technology International, and regional preservation organizations offered workshops, conferences, and certification programs that would develop practical skills while building professional networks. The learning curve for preservation work can be managed through structured educational programs, combined with mentored practical experience, Victoria explained. Many preservation professionals continue their education throughout their careers because the field requires ongoing learning about new techniques, materials, and research methods. Victoria's description of educational pathways suggested that career transition into preservation work was achievable for individuals who possessed dedication and intellectual curiosity, regardless of their previous professional background. The combination of formal education with practical training and professional mentorship could provide the foundation for meaningful contribution to cultural heritage preservation efforts. As our conversation progressed, Victoria presented a specific proposal that would allow me to explore preservation work while maintaining financial security and building professional expertise through structured learning and practical experience. Her suggestion reflected both practical assessment of my current situation and recognition of potential opportunities for mutually beneficial professional collaboration. Brennan Traditional Building Arts has been seeking a partner who could handle the research, documentation, and client communication aspects of our preservation projects, Victoria explained. Your educational background and communication skills would complement our technical capabilities, while allowing you to develop preservation expertise through hands-on project involvement. The collaboration Victoria proposed would allow me to contribute to meaningful preservation work, while learning traditional techniques and developing specialized knowledge through guided practical experience. The partnership would provide financial stability during the transition period, while offering opportunities to determine whether preservation work aligned with my authentic interests and professional aspirations. Victoria's proposal included specific responsibilities that would utilize my existing capabilities while providing opportunities for skill development in preservation-related areas. Historical research, project documentation, client education, and regulatory compliance represented aspects of preservation work that required skills I possessed, while offering pathways for developing specialized expertise through practical application. This type of collaboration would allow you to honor David's legacy while creating your own professional identity within the preservation community, Victoria continued. The learning process would be supported by established client relationships and proven project management systems that would reduce the risks typically associated with career transition. Victoria's description of the preservation community revealed a network of professionals who valued cultural heritage maintenance and traditional craftsmanship over conventional measures of professional success. The individuals who had worked with David
shared commitment to meaningful work that contributed to cultural preservation and educated future generations about traditional building techniques and historical authenticity. The preservation community functions as an extended professional family where experienced practitioners mentor newcomers, and collaboration is valued over competition. Your entry into this community would be supported by David's reputation and the relationships he established with clients and colleagues who respected his expertise and integrity. The community integration that Victoria described represented an alternative to the competitive professional environments that characterized many contemporary career fields. The preservation community's emphasis on knowledge sharing, collaborative problem solving, and cultural heritage maintenance created opportunities for meaningful professional relationships and shared commitment to purposes that transcended individual advance. Victoria introduced me to the concept that professional fulfillment could emerge from work that aligned with personal values and contributed to cultural preservation efforts that would benefit future generations. The preservation community's dedication to maintaining traditional knowledge and techniques represented commitment to purposes larger than immediate personal advancement or financial gain. David found profound satisfaction in preservation work because it connected him to centuries of building tradition while contributing to cultural heritage maintenance for future generations. Victoria reflected. This type of meaningful professional engagement is available to anyone who possesses dedication to cultural preservation and willingness to invest effort in developing specialized knowledge and practical skill. Victoria's visit had fundamentally altered my understanding of the possibilities available for managing David's heritage restoration legacy while pursuing authentic professional engagement that could provide both personal fulfillment and financial security. Her perspective on career development within the preservation field challenged my assumptions about the relationship between existing skills and new opportunities, while offering practical pathways for meaningful professional transition. The collaboration opportunity Victoria proposed provided a structured approach to exploring preservation work, while maintaining the financial stability necessary for managing David's business obligations and my own household responsibility. The partnership would allow gradual transition into specialized work, while building expertise through mentored practical experience and formal educational development. Victoria's insights into the preservation community and its values had revealed an alternative professional environment where meaningful work and cultural heritage maintenance were prioritized over conventional success metrics. The opportunity to contribute to cultural preservation efforts while developing expertise in areas that aligned with my intellectual interests represented possibilities for authentic professional engagement that I had never considered during my teaching career. As Victoria prepared to leave that afternoon, she offered a final observation that would influence my decision-making process during the coming week. Her comment reflected the wisdom of someone who had successfully navigated career transition into meaningful work while building professional relationships based on shared values and collaborative commitment to cultural heritage preservation. The most important question you need to answer is not whether you possess the technical skills required for preservation work, but whether this type of meaningful professional engagement aligns with your authentic interests and values, Victoria said. The technical knowledge can be learned through education and practice, but the passion for cultural heritage preservation must come from genuine interest in contributing to something larger than individual advancement. Her words remained with me long after her truck disappeared down our street, carrying both the promise of new possibilities and the challenge of determining whether I possessed the courage to pursue authentic professional engagement, rather than returning to the familiar security of conventional employment that required no examination of personal values or meaning. Contribution to cultural heritage preservation efforts. Victoria's departure left me alone in David's workshop with questions that demanded honest self-examination beyond the practical concerns of business management and client obligation. Her suggestion that I could potentially contribute to preservation work had introduced possibilities I had never considered, but it also required me to confront fundamental questions about my own authentic interests, suppressed capability, and the patterns of decision-making that had shaped my professional choices throughout my adult life. The garage workshop became a space for introspection as I examined the tools and materials David had used to pursue his passion for historical preservation. Each piece of equipment represented investments of time, money, and intellectual energy in developing expertise that aligned with his authentic interests and values. The contrast between his hidden workshop and my own professional environment at Westfield Elementary School revealed the difference between work pursued for external validation versus work that emerged from genuine passion and meaningful purpose. I found myself questioning when I had stopped examining my own authentic interests in favor of pursuing career paths that offered security and social approval. Teaching had provided stability and respect within our community, but I could not remember the last time I had felt genuinely excited about curriculum development or educational innovation. My professional routine had become comfortable but mechanically predictable, lacking the intellectual engagement and creative satisfaction that David had apparently found in his preservation work. The realization that I had accepted professional mediocrity while David had been pursuing authentic excellence in his hidden career forced me to examine the assumptions and fears that had guided my own career decisions. When had I begun prioritizing safety over growth, predictability over exploration, and external approval over internal satisfaction? The comfortable routines that had characterized my teaching career suddenly felt like elaborate avoidance mechanisms, rather than indicators of professional maturity and responsible decision-making. As I continued working through David's materials and equipment, I found myself recalling interests and activities from my childhood and adolescence that I had abandoned in favor of more practical pursuits. These memories emerged gradually, like artifacts being carefully excavated from layers of accumulated convention and strategic career planning that had obscured my original curiosity and natural inclinations toward specific types of learning and creative expression. I remembered spending hours in my grandmother's attic, fascinated by old photographs, documents, and household items that told stories about family history and social changes that had occurred throughout the 20th century. My grandmother, Carmen Vasquez, had emigrated from Mexico in the 1940s and had carefully preserved letters, photographs, and personal items that documented her family's journey from rural Michoacán to industrial Massachusetts. I had been captivated by these historical artifacts and the stories they represented about adaptation, perseverance, and cultural preservation. During high school, I had volunteered at the local historical society, helping to catalog archival materials and assist with research projects that connected contemporary community members with their family histories and local heritage. The work had engaged my curiosity about how individual stories contributed to broader historical narratives and how material culture reflected social changes and cultural values across generations. These experiences had generated genuine enthusiasm for historical research and cultural preservation that I had dismissed as impractical hobbies rather than potential foundations for meaningful professional work. My guidance counselors and parents had encouraged me to pursue education as a stable career that would provide financial security and social respectability. While my authentic interests in historical research and cultural documentation were relegated to occasional volunteer activities and personal reading, the memory of these suppressed interests created both excitement and regret as I recognized how my authentic curiosity about historical preservation and cultural heritage had been systematically discouraged in favor of conventional career planning. The passion for understanding how material culture connected past and present that had captivated me during adolescence bore striking similarities to the work that David had been pursuing through heritage restoration. The process of recovering these childhood memories revealed patterns in my decision-making that had consistently prioritized external approval and financial security over authentic interest and personal growth. Throughout my educational and professional development, I had made choices based on what appeared safe and respectable rather than what genuinely engaged my intellectual curiosity or creative capability. My selection of education as a college major had been influenced primarily by its reputation as stable employment that would be respected within my family's immigrant community and would provide predictable income and benefits. While I had found satisfaction in working with children and contributing to their educational development, I had never examined whether teaching represented my authentic calling or simply met societal expectations for appropriate career choices for young women from working-class backgrounds. The graduate courses I had taken to maintain my teaching certification had focused on classroom management and curriculum standards rather than subjects that interested me personally. I had completed the required professional development activities efficiently, but without enthusiasm, treating them as obligations to be managed rather than opportunities for intellectual growth and professional exploration. Even my volunteer activities and personal interests had been shaped by considerations of how they would appear to others rather than what brought me genuine satisfaction and engagement. I had chosen safe, socially acceptable forms of community involvement that enhanced my reputation as a responsible community member while avoiding activities that might be perceived as unconventional or potentially risky to my professional standing. This pattern of decision-making had created a life that appeared successful from external perspectives, but lacked the authentic engagement and personal fulfillment that Victoria had described as characteristic of meaningful professional work. I had become extremely proficient at performing the role of competent teacher and responsible community member while remaining disconnected from my genuine interests and capabilities. Victoria's suggestion that my educational background and communication skills could contribute to preservation work prompted me to conduct an honest assessment of the capabilities I had developed through teaching and how they might translate to different professional applications. This evaluation required moving beyond conventional job descriptions to examine the fundamental skills and knowledge that I had acquired and how they might serve purposes I had never considered. My teaching experience had developed research capabilities through curriculum planning, lesson development, and educational program design that required synthesizing information from multiple sources and presenting complex concepts in accessible format. These skills could potentially support the historical research and documentation activities that Victoria had identified as important components of preservation work. The communication and presentation abilities I had developed through teaching could contribute to client education, public outreach, and professional development programs within the preservation community. My experience explaining complex educational concepts to diverse audiences had prepared me to translate specialized preservation knowledge for property owners, community groups, and other stakeholders who needed to understand historical building techniques and preservation requirements. Project management and organizational skills that I had applied to classroom management and educational program coordination could support the planning and implementation of complex restoration projects that required coordination between multiple specialists, regulatory compliant timeline management. These capabilities were transferable to preservation work, even though I lacked specific technical knowledge about traditional building techniques.
The most significant realization emerging from this competency assessment was that I possessed intellectual capabilities and professional skills that could contribute meaningfully to preservation work if I developed specialized knowledge through education and practical experience. The barrier to career transition was not lack of relevant abilities, but rather my own assumptions about the relationship between existing skills and new professional opportunities. Encouraged by Victoria's insights and my own competency assessment, I began deliberately exploring my authentic interest in historical preservation and cultural heritage through reading, research, and direct observation of preservation projects in our region. This exploration represented the first time in years that I had pursued learning purely for personal interest, rather than professional obligation or social expectation. I spent evenings reading about preservation methodology, traditional building techniques, and the theoretical foundations of cultural heritage management. The scholarly literature revealed preservation work as an interdisciplinary field that combined historical research, architectural analysis, material science, and community engagement in ways that appealed to my intellectual curiosity and desire for meaningful professional engagement. Visiting preservation projects that David had worked on provided opportunities to observe restoration techniques and understand the practical challenges associated with maintaining historical authenticity while meeting contemporary functionality requirements. These site visits revealed the complexity and sophistication of preservation work while demonstrating how different types of expertise contributed to successful project outcomes. The conversations I had with preservation professionals during these site visits revealed a community of individuals who possessed genuine passion for their work and derived satisfaction from contributing to cultural heritage maintenance. Their enthusiasm for traditional building techniques and historical research created a professional environment that prioritized meaningful impact over conventional success metrics. Most significantly, I discovered that learning about preservation techniques and historical building methods engaged my intellectual curiosity in ways that my routine teaching responsibilities had not stimulated for several years. The combination of historical research, material analysis, and practical problem-solving required interdisciplinary thinking and continuous learning that appealed to my natural inclinations toward investigation and discovery. My growing interest in preservation work prompted investigation of educational opportunities that could provide the foundation for professional transition while building specialized knowledge and practical skill. This research revealed multiple pathways for developing preservation expertise that could accommodate my current financial responsibilities and time constraints while providing structured learning and professional development. The Historic Preservation Graduate Program at the University of Massachusetts Amherst offered comprehensive education in preservation methodology that combined scholarly research with practical training in restoration techniques and project management. The program structure allowed part-time enrollment that could accommodate continued employment while building specialized knowledge through evening and weekend coursework. Professional development workshops offered by preservation organizations provided intensive training in specific techniques and methodologies that could supplement formal education while building professional relationships within the preservation community. These workshops covered topics ranging from traditional building materials and techniques to preservation planning and community engagement strategy. The National Trust for Historic Preservation offered online courses and certification programs that could provide foundational knowledge while accommodating the flexibility required for managing David's business obligations and exploring career transition options. These programs emphasized practical applications of preservation principles and provided networking opportunities with preservation professionals throughout the country. Local preservation organizations offered volunteer opportunities that could provide hands-on experience with restoration projects while contributing to community heritage preservation efforts. These volunteer positions could serve as informal internships that would develop practical skills while demonstrating commitment to preservation work and building relationships with established professionals in the field. The investigation of preservation work and educational opportunities forced me to examine my authentic values and priorities in ways that I had avoided throughout my conventional career development. This examination revealed fundamental alignments between preservation principles and personal values that I had never been encouraged to explore or develop professionally. The preservation community's commitment to maintaining cultural heritage for future generations resonated with my belief that contemporary decisions should consider their impact on subsequent generations and community well-being. The emphasis on research, documentation, and education as essential components of preservation work aligned with my natural inclinations toward learning and knowledge sharing. The interdisciplinary nature of preservation work appealed to my preference for complex problem-solving that required synthesizing information from multiple sources and perspectives. The combination of historical research, material analysis, and practical application offered intellectual challenges that were absent from my routine teaching responsibility. Most importantly, preservation work offered opportunities to contribute to purposes larger than individual advancement, while building expertise in areas that genuinely interested me. The satisfaction that preservation professionals derived from their work suggested that authentic professional engagement was possible when career choices aligned with personal values and intellectual curiosity. The values alignment I discovered through this exploration process revealed how extensively my previous career choices had been influenced by external expectations rather than authentic interest and personal conviction. The conventional path I had followed had provided security and social approval, but had not engaged my genuine passions or utilized my authentic capabilities in ways that would provide long-term satisfaction and meaningful contribution. As my investigation of preservation work deepened and educational opportunities became clearer, I experienced intense internal conflict between excitement about potential career transition and fear about abandoning the security and predictability that had characterized my professional life. This tension reflected fundamental questions about risk tolerance, personal growth, and the relationship between safety and authentic living that required honest self-examination. The practical concerns about career transition were legitimate and substantial. Leaving established employment to pursue education and training in an unfamiliar field involved financial risks and uncertainty about professional outcomes that challenged my instincts toward careful planning and risk avoidance. The preservation field was smaller and more specialized than education, potentially offering fewer employment opportunities and less predictable career advancement pathways. However, the excitement I felt about learning preservation techniques and contributing to cultural heritage maintenance represented authentic enthusiasm that I had not experienced in my professional life for several years. The prospect of developing expertise in areas that genuinely interested me while working within a community committed to meaningful purposes offered possibilities for professional fulfillment that transcended conventional success metrics. The tension between fear and possibility forced me to examine fundamental questions about the kind of life I wanted to build moving forward, and whether continued pursuit of security and predictability would ultimately provide the satisfaction and personal growth that I sought. The discovery of David's hidden passion for preservation work had revealed that authentic professional engagement was possible, but required courage to pursue interests that might not align with conventional expectations or guaranteed outcomes. As I concluded this period of intensive self-examination and exploration, I realized that the decision about whether to pursue preservation work was fundamentally about whether I possessed the courage to prioritize authentic interest over conventional security and whether I believed meaningful professional engagement was worth the risks associated with career transition and personal growth. Victoria's offer to collaborate with Brennan Traditional Building Arts provided a structured pathway for exploring preservation work, while maintaining financial stability and building expertise through mentored practical experience. The opportunity to contribute to meaningful projects while learning specialized techniques offered the possibility of career transition without requiring immediate abandonment of all security and predictability. The educational opportunities I had investigated provided multiple pathways for developing preservation expertise that could accommodate my current responsibilities, while building knowledge and professional relationships within the preservation community. The combination of formal education, practical training, and collaborative work experience could provide comprehensive preparation for meaningful contribution to cultural heritage preservation efforts. Most importantly, the process of honest self-examination had revealed authentic interests and capabilities that I had systematically suppressed in favor of conventional career choices that prioritized external approval over personal fulfillment. The alignment between preservation work and my genuine values and intellectual curiosity suggested that this career transition could provide not only professional satisfaction, but also opportunities for continued personal growth and meaningful contribution to cultural heritage maintenance. The decision framework that emerged from this investigation centered on whether I possessed sufficient courage to pursue authentic professional engagement despite the uncertainties and risks involved, and whether I believed that the potential for meaningful work and personal fulfillment justified the effort and uncertainty required for career transition into preservation work. The weeks following my internal investigation marked the beginning of systematic research into preservation, education, and professional development opportunities that could provide the foundation for meaningful career transition. Professional organizations and training programs with the analytical rigor I had applied to curriculum development during my teaching career, while maintaining focus on opportunities that aligned with my authentic interests and practical constraints. The University of Massachusetts Amherst Historic Preservation Program emerged as the most comprehensive educational pathway for developing expertise in preservation methodology and cultural heritage management. The program's structure combined scholarly research in architectural history and preservation theory with practical training in restoration techniques and project management. The curriculum addressed both the intellectual foundations of preservation work and the professional skills required for successful implementation of complex restoration projects. Elizabeth Hartwell, whom I had contacted regarding David's previous coursework, provided detailed information about the program requirements and career outcomes for graduates who possessed diverse professional backgrounds prior to entering preservation education. Her insights revealed that successful preservation professionals often brought interdisciplinary expertise from fields such as education, museum studies, architecture, and public administration that enhanced their effectiveness in managing complex projects requiring coordination between multiple stakeholders and specialized crafts. The program offered both full-time and part-time enrollment options that could accommodate continued employment while building specialized knowledge through evening and weekend coursework. The part-time pathway would allow me to maintain financial stability while exploring preservation work through structured academic study and supervised practical experience with restoration projects throughout Western Massachusetts and Connecticut. Hartwell emphasized that preservation education emphasized hands-on learning through fieldwork and collaborative projects that connected theoretical knowledge with practical application. Students regularly participated in documentation projects, condition assessments, and restoration planning initiatives that provided professional experience while contributing to actual preservation efforts within the regional community. Beyond formal academic programs, my research revealed extensive professional development opportunities offered by national and regional preservation organizations that could provide specialized training in specific techniques and methodologies while building professional relationships within the preservation community. These workshops and certification programs offered flexible scheduling and focused curricula that could supplement formal education while accommodating practical constraints related to time and financial resources. The National Trust for Historic Preservation offered comprehensive training programs in preservation planning, traditional building materials, and community engagement strategies that addressed both technical and administrative aspects of preservation work. These programs were designed for professionals with diverse backgrounds who sought to develop specialized expertise in cultural heritage management and historic property preservation. The Association for Preservation Technology International provided technical workshops in traditional building techniques, material conservation, and documentation methodologies that emphasized hands-on learning and professional networking. The organization's certification programs offered credentials that were recognized throughout the preservation industry and provided pathways for advancement within specialized practice areas. Regional preservation organizations throughout New England offered local training opportunities that focused on building types and preservation challenges specific to the Northeast's architectural heritage. These programs emphasized practical applications of preservation principles while building professional relationships with craftsmen, property owners, and institutional stakeholders who were actively engaged in preservation projects throughout the region. The Vermont-based Preservation Trust offered intensive summer workshops in traditional building crafts that provided immersive learning experiences in timber framing, traditional masonry, and historical finish techniques. These programs attracted participants from throughout North America who sought to develop hands-on expertise in traditional construction methods that were essential for authentic restoration work. My investigation included
detailed research into career pathways of preservation professionals who had successfully transitioned from other fields and developed expertise in cultural heritage management through education and practical experience. These case studies provided realistic models for career development while revealing the diverse routes through which individuals had entered preservation work and built meaningful professional practices. Sarah Martinez had transitioned from high school history teaching to preservation planning after completing graduate education in historic preservation and gaining experience through volunteer work with local historical societies. Her career trajectory demonstrated how educational background and communication skills could support effective preservation practice when combined with specialized knowledge and community engagement. Michael Patterson had moved from museum education to architectural restoration after developing expertise in traditional building techniques through apprenticeships with master craftsmen and formal training in preservation methodology. His success illustrated how passion for cultural heritage combined with systematic skill development could create opportunities for meaningful professional contribution to preservation efforts. Jennifer Walsh had established a successful preservation consulting practice after leaving corporate marketing to pursue graduate education in preservation planning and develop expertise in regulatory compliance and community engagement. Her experience demonstrated how transferable professional skills could support preservation work when applied to cultural heritage management and stakeholder coordination. These career transition examples revealed common elements that contributed to successful entry into preservation work, including commitment to continuous learning, willingness to invest time in developing specialized knowledge, and dedication to building professional relationships within the preservation community. The diversity of backgrounds represented among successful preservation professionals suggested that authentic interest and systematic skill development were more important than specific technical expertise or prior experience with traditional building techniques. The practical considerations associated with career transition required comprehensive analysis of the financial implications of pursuing preservation education while managing David's business obligations and maintaining household expenses. This assessment involved examining educational costs, potential income reduction during transition periods, and long-term earning potential within preservation fields compared to continued teaching employment. The graduate program tuition and associated educational expenses represented significant financial investments that needed to be balanced against potential career benefits and personal satisfaction gain. However, the financial resources available through heritage restorations, business accounts, and equipment sales could provide funding for educational expenses while reducing the need for student loans or other debt obligations. Part-time enrollment options would allow continued teaching employment during the initial phases of preservation education, providing income stability while building specialized knowledge and practical experience. The gradual transition approach would reduce financial risks while allowing evaluation of career satisfaction and professional aptitude for preservation work before making complete commitment to field transition. Long-term earning potential within preservation fields varied significantly depending on specialization areas and practice model, but established preservation professionals could achieve financial success comparable to or exceeding teaching salaries while pursuing work that provided greater personal fulfillment and professional growth opportunity. The specialized nature of preservation expertise commanded premium compensation for complex projects requiring technical knowledge and professional experience. Victoria's collaboration proposal offered immediate income opportunities that could support educational expenses while providing practical training and professional development within established client relationships. The partnership structure would reduce the financial risks typically associated with independent practice development while building expertise through mentored experience with complex restoration projects. My continued communication with Heritage Restoration's client base revealed widespread interest in maintaining professional relationships and project continuity despite David's death and my lack of technical preservation expertise. These conversations provided insights into client needs and expectations while identifying opportunities for modified service delivery that could utilize my developing skills while ensuring appropriate technical oversight for specialized restoration work. Mrs. Margaret Thornfield expressed willingness to support my preservation education through project-based learning opportunities that would allow me to contribute to her window restoration project while building practical knowledge under professional supervision. Her commitment to maintaining heritage restoration relationships reflected appreciation for David's approach to client communication and project management that extended beyond technical craftsmanship to include education and cultural heritage appreciation. Richard Barnes offered to serve as a reference for preservation program applications based on his experience with David's professional competence and his assessment of my potential for developing preservation expertise through structured education and practical training. His support demonstrated how client relationships could facilitate career transition through professional recommendations and learning opportunities. The Lexington Historical Society expressed interest in supporting my preservation education through internship opportunities that would provide practical experience with documentation projects, condition assessments, and community engagement initiatives. These opportunities would allow contribution to meaningful preservation efforts while building professional experience and establishing credibility within the preservation community. Client willingness to support my transition into preservation work reflected their appreciation for the professional relationships and service quality that heritage restoration had provided. Their commitment to maintaining these relationships suggested that career transition could build upon established trust and communication patterns while developing technical expertise through education and practical experience. Victoria's introduction to the regional preservation communities facilitated connections with experienced professionals who could provide guidance and support throughout the career transition process. These relationships offered access to practical wisdom about preservation practice, professional development strategies, and the personal satisfaction that could be derived from cultural heritage work. Master craftsman Robert Chen, who specialized in traditional Chinese architectural restoration, shared insights about the intellectual and spiritual rewards associated with preserving cultural heritage while maintaining connections to traditional knowledge and craftsmanship practice. His perspective on preservation work as cultural stewardship rather than commercial enterprise provided philosophical foundations for approaching career transition as service to community heritage rather than individual advancement. Patricia Williams, the Preservation Planning Director for the Massachusetts Historical Commission, offered practical guidance about regulatory requirements, professional certification pathways, and career development strategies within public sector preservation work. Her experience demonstrated how preservation professionals could contribute to policy development and community planning while building expertise in cultural heritage management. Thomas Anderson, the traditional building craftsman who had collaborated with David on timber frame restoration projects, provided insights into the technical aspects of preservation work and the satisfaction derived from maintaining traditional building skills for contemporary application. His mentorship offered pathways for developing hands-on expertise while building professional relationships within the specialized community of traditional craftsmen. These mentor relationships created support networks that could facilitate successful transition into preservation work while providing ongoing guidance about professional development and career advancement within specialized practice areas. The willingness of established professionals to share knowledge and provide support reflected the collaborative culture that Victoria had described as characteristic of the preservation community. The decision to pursue formal preservation education required completing comprehensive applications that demonstrated both academic preparation and professional commitment to cultural heritage work. This process involved articulating career transition motivations, preservation interests, and long-term professional goals in ways that convinced admissions committees of my potential for successful completion of rigorous academic programs and meaningful meaningful contribution to preservation practice. The personal statement requirements forced detailed examination of my authentic interests in preservation work and the connections between my educational background, professional experience, and career transition goals. Writing these statements required honest assessment of my motivations for leaving teaching and pursuing preservation work while demonstrating understanding of preservation principles and commitment to cultural heritage stewardship. Academic transcripts and recommendation letters needed to demonstrate intellectual capability and professional competence while addressing potential concerns about career transition and commitment to completing specialized graduate education. The application process required coordination between former professors, teaching supervisors, and preservation professionals who could provide credible assessments of my potential for success in preservation education and practice. The portfolio requirements involved documenting relevant experience through research projects, volunteer activities, and professional accomplishments that demonstrated transferable skills and authentic interest in cultural heritage work. These materials needed to illustrate how my teaching experience and educational background provided foundations for preservation work while acknowledging the need for specialized knowledge and practical training. Financial aid applications required comprehensive documentation of educational expenses, available resources, and funding needs that would support successful completion of preservation education without compromising basic living expenses or David's business obligation. The complexity of managing multiple financial considerations required careful planning and realistic assessment of resource availability throughout the education period. The systematic evaluation of career transition opportunities required honest assessment of risks and uncertainties associated with leaving established employment to pursue education and training in an unfamiliar professional field. This analysis involved examining both practical concerns about financial security and personal questions about aptitude for preservation work and satisfaction with career transition outcomes. Professional risks included the possibility that preservation work might not provide the intellectual engagement and personal fulfillment that I anticipated based on initial exploration and research. The specialized nature of preservation practice meant that career advancement opportunities were more limited than in broader professional fields, potentially constraining long-term growth and development possibilities. Financial risks involved the costs associated with education and training, potential income reduction during transition periods, and uncertainty about earning potential within preservation practice compared to continued teaching employment. The investment in career transition needed to be balanced against realistic assessment of financial returns and professional satisfaction gain. Personal risks included the possibility that preservation education might reveal lack of aptitude for technical aspects of restoration work or insufficient interest in the detailed research and documentation required for authentic preservation practice. The commitment to career transition required confidence in my ability to develop specialized expertise and find satisfaction in preservation work despite limited prior experience with traditional building techniques. However, the risk assessment also revealed potential costs associated with remaining in teaching employment that no longer provided intellectual challenge or personal fulfillment. The opportunity costs of avoiding career transition included continued professional stagnation, unrealized potential for meaningful contribution to cultural heritage preservation, and personal regret about failing to pursue authentic interests and professional growth opportunities. The comprehensive research phase had provided detailed information about educational opportunities, professional development pathways, and career transition models that could support successful entry into preservation work. The analysis of risks and opportunities revealed that career transition was feasible with appropriate planning and support, while remaining in teaching would likely result in continued professional dissatisfaction and unrealized potential for meaningful work.
The alignment between preservation principles and my authentic interests in historical research cultural heritage, and educational applications, suggested that career transition could provide both personal fulfillment and professional growth opportunities that were absent from continued teaching employment. The collaborative culture within the preservation community offered support networks and mentorship relationships that could facilitate successful transition and long-term career development. Victoria's collaboration proposal provided a structured pathway for beginning preservation work while building expertise through education and practical experience. The opportunity to contribute to meaningful projects while developing specialized knowledge offered the possibility of gradual career transition without requiring immediate abandonment of financial security and professional predictability. The client relationships and business assets inherited through heritage restoration created unique advantages for entering preservation practice with established professional connections and financial resources that could support education and career development. These assets provided opportunities for career transition that would not be available to individuals entering preservation work without prior connections to the professional community. As I concluded this intensive research phase, the framework for making a definitive decision about career transition had emerged through systematic analysis of opportunities, risks, and alignment between preservation work and my authentic interests and professional goals. The remaining question was whether I possessed sufficient courage to pursue meaningful career transition despite legitimate uncertainties about outcomes and the substantial changes that would be required in my professional identity and life structure. The comprehensive research I had conducted over the past month provided sufficient information to make informed decisions about career transition, but the magnitude of change I was contemplating required honest conversations with family members, whose opinions and support would significantly influence my ability to pursue preservation education and professional development. These discussions would test whether my support network could accommodate my evolution from conventional teaching employment toward specialized preservation work that aligned with my authentic interests, but challenged traditional expectations about career stability and financial security. My parents, Carmen and Roberto Vasquez, had immigrated from Mexico with profound faith in American educational opportunities and conventional measures of professional success. Their sacrifices to provide educational advantages for their children had been motivated by beliefs that stable employment in respected professions would guarantee financial security and social acceptance that had been denied to their generation. The prospect of their daughter abandoning established teaching employment to pursue graduate education in an unfamiliar field challenged fundamental assumptions about practical decision-making and responsible career management. The conversation with my parents required careful preparation and thoughtful presentation of my research findings and career transition rationale. I needed to demonstrate that preservation work represented meaningful professional opportunity rather than impractical pursuit of personal interests that would jeopardize financial stability and professional advancement. The discussion would need to address their legitimate concerns about career change while sharing my authentic enthusiasm for cultural heritage work and my assessment of realistic opportunities within the preservation field. I scheduled a weekend visit to their home in Hartford, Connecticut, where we could discuss my career considerations without time pressures or distraction. The familiar environment of their kitchen table, where we had shared countless family discussions throughout my childhood and adolescence, provided appropriate setting for honest conversation about my professional future and their role in supporting significant life change. The initial presentation of my research findings focused on educational opportunities and career pathways within preservation work, emphasizing the academic rigor and professional recognition associated with historic preservation programs and cultural heritage management. I shared information about successful preservation professionals who had built meaningful careers while contributing to cultural heritage maintenance and traditional craftsmanship preservation. My father's response reflected practical concerns about financial security and professional stability that had guided his own career decisions throughout 40 years in manufacturing management. His questions addressed earning potential within preservation fields, employment opportunities for preservation specialists, and long-term career advancement prospects compared to continued teaching employment with predictable salary progression and comprehensive benefit. My mother's perspective incorporated emotional considerations about personal fulfillment and professional satisfaction that she had observed during my teaching career. Her insights revealed recognition that my professional routine had become mechanically predictable without generating the intellectual engagement and creative satisfaction that characterized meaningful work. Her support for exploring alternative career paths reflected understanding that authentic professional fulfillment required alignment between personal interests and professional responsibilities. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.